Evening. I did request this urgent briefing because we are concerned about rescinding Title 42. Now, this has been a tool for the agents that they had at their disposal to quickly expel migrants back across the border. Will mean for their ability to keep our borders secure. For more than a year, House Republicans have been calling attention to this crisis at our southern border. Those around this table have been calling on it probably more than anybody else. But for 14 months, we have seen this administration's neglect their responsibilities and refuse to give the Border Patrol the tools they need to do their job. So I wanted to put together this in a quick notice, especially after what the White House said they want to do come May 23rd. And Brandon, I want to start with you, but first of all, I want to thank you for the job you're doing. I want to thank you for the time and again that you have made yourself available to members on both sides of the aisle to answer questions, to give information, to tell us up to date what is truly happening on the ground there for so many of your Border Patrol agents. But can you give us a sense of the current conditions on the ground, and how do you expect things to worsen once Title 42 is officially rescinded?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Leader McCarthy, thanks for the time, and I appreciate Ranking Member Tatko, his time as well. I've got several great individuals with me today. I've got John Anfinsen from Del Rio. He's the local president out of Del Rio, also one of my national vice presidents. I've got Hector Garza, also one of my vice presidents and local president out of Laredo. I've got Chris Cabrera, one of my presidents out of the Rio Grande Valley, and Albert Trevino, who does so much work on the Hill for us, and I appreciate each of them. Not only am I the national president, I'm also the local president of Tucson as well. It allows us to be a lot more effective, to streamline what we do. Just to give you an idea of what we're facing right now, a high-level overview. If we apprehend 3,500 individuals, our resources are stretched thin. We can still marginally manage by playing bait and switch, by moving agents to different locations to try to manage the situation. Once we hit 5,000, our resources are now completely overwhelmed, and we're at a crisis level. Just last week, we hit over 8,000 apprehensions in one day, and that's where it's trending. We're continuing to go up and up, and what that does is that pulls all of our resources out of the field and it gives the criminal cartels complete control. What we've seen over the last year is we have seen that President Biden's policies have put us in this situation, and I don't like saying that because I do want to work on both sides of the aisle. I do want to come up with solutions, but what I have seen is that this administration absolutely does not want to give us the policies that are going to allow us to control the situation. This can simply be controlled by policy. We don't need to burden the taxpayer. We don't have to ask the taxpayer to shoulder what is currently going on. If we had the proper policies, we have the current resources to deal with this issue, and we could secure the border with our current resources. But what's interesting about that is because this has gotten so bad, morale is so low, we lost more than 200 agents more than what we were able to hire last year. That's the first time that has happened in a number of years, going all the way back to the Obama administration. And currently, right now, we're on pace not to hit our hiring target for the first time in over 10 years. And that's simply because people don't want to put on a uniform and do a job that they're not going to feel good about when they go home at the end of the day. We want to protect the American public. We want to feel like our job matters. And right now, that just is not the case. And so it's a situation that is absolutely untenable. And what has caused this? We can talk about the root causes as much as we want, but there is a simple fact, and the evidence bears this out, and it's borne it out over and over again. Catch and release is the single biggest driver of illegal immigration. If we reward people for violating our laws, people are going to continue to come. And now when we're talking about getting rid of Title 42, the only policy that this administration has kept in place that came from the Trump administration, once we get rid of that, then the floodgates are going to completely burst open. Just to give you an idea of how bad it will be, in the month of March, We expelled under Title 42 between 52 and 55% of the people that we apprehended. And we made over 200,000 apprehensions in the month of March. Once Title 42 goes away, those 200,000 apprehensions that we make, I'm sorry, I digress a little bit. Of those 55%, if we expelled them, the rest that we processed for Title 8, they ultimately got released because ICE just doesn't have the facilities to hold them. Whether it was the Border Patrol that released them, or it was ICE that released them, or it was HHS, they were ultimately released, meaning that in the month of March, we released 100,000 people into the United States with either a notice to appear, parole to ATD, or they were released under HHS because they were unaccompanied juveniles. Once Title 42 goes away, those 200,000 apprehensions, all of them will be processed under Title 8. And if they are processed under Title 8, they will ultimately be released. So we were on pace already to release into this country more than 600,000 illegal border crossers. Once Title 42 goes away, that's going to jump up. And it's not just going to be 200,000 people. Like I said, we already hit 8,000 in one day last week, and the numbers just continue to go up. We're hovering right around 8,000 every single day. Title 42 goes away, and there's going to be even more people that are going to come in because the cartels are going to be able to go into countries, advertise their services, let them know that once they come to the United States, give them a couple $1,000s if they're from Central America, well over $35,000 if they're coming from China. If they do that, they will get them to the border of the United States, and even if they're apprehended, they will then ultimately be released. But it goes beyond just the catch and release. And that's where we get into the Tucson sector. Tucson historically, my sector, has had the most gotaways of any other sector. That means people are entering the country illegally. They're trying to evade apprehension. And because of the resources and how stretched we are doing administrative duties, we just can't take them into custody. Last month alone, there were 62,000 known gotaways. Add that on top of the 100,000 people that were basically released under Title 42, and we just added to our population a minimum of 162,000 illegal border crossers, and those individuals are not going away. Just look at ICE's stats. I was thoroughly disgusted when I heard the White House give a briefing on what they were going to do when Title 42 goes away. And the White House made it sound like individuals that cross the border illegally will then be put into deportation proceedings and would be removed. They're correct in saying that they're going to be put in deportation proceedings, but they're not going to be removed. Once they get released into the United States, they never show up again. Just look at the number of deportations ICE has had in this last year. Lowest number in, I believe it's been 10 years. So this whole situation coming together, once Title 42 goes away, this crisis is going to go beyond that. We are ultimately going to wave the white flag of surrender. The cartels are going to control our borders, going to create gaps in our coverage, going to cross more of their drugs, their fentanyls, and more of our US citizens are going to die simply because this administration does not want to give the proper policies to protect United States citizens. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John Anfinsen so he can discuss Del Rio specific, what he's seeing in Del Rio. Then we'll go to Hector Garza to talk about Laredo. And from Hector, we'll go to Chris Cabrera. And after that, we'll take any of the questions that you might have.
Thanks, Brandon. So as you said, I'm in Del Rio sector, which was, of course, the site of the Haitian migrant camp that we had last September. So here in Del Rio, we've seen what happens when there is such a large influx of crossings in a short time frame. In the days before that, before the camp set up in September, we've been seeing about 1,100 or so arrests per day. But then that week, it shot up to some days where we had 3,300 or so in a single day. In the 2 weeks that ended with the day that the last person left that camp, we had almost 27,000 people arrested in our sector, with about 20,000 of them just in the city of Del Rio. So that was just a glimpse of what we're afraid could happen up and down the border. But if you look at Del Rio sector in the last month, the numbers aren't quite yet official, but we were averaging somewhere around 1,300 or so people per day. So we're expecting last month will be just about 41,000 for just for Del Rio sector. But then of those 41,000 people that crossed, about 15,000 or so were amenable to Title 42. The remaining 25,000 or so were under Title 8, which, as Brandon said, ultimately means they're going to be released. Of those 25,000, almost 20,000 were from Venezuela, Cuba, or Nicaragua. Those are the largest groups we're seeing right now here in Del Rio. But that's not the end of the story, because last month we had over 22,000 known gotaways. And we only know that it's that high because we've had to put agents on mandatory overtime so they could spend at least some time in the field trying to gain some semblance of control. And while we're out there, we're able to see what's actually getting away. We have about 240 miles of border. And depending on how terrible things are on any given day, we've had days with no agents patrolling whatsoever. The only ones who are out there are doing transportation duties, picking up the groups that are turning themselves in, or the processing. So that was last month. But of course, in the past few days, it's gotten worse. Yesterday, we had over 1,500 arrests, and 1,100 of those were single adults. The day before that, it was 1,600 arrests, and over 1,200 were single adults. So we're starting to see these days where our numbers are creeping up and getting closer and closer to what we saw last September. So, but if you just go back over the past 4 days, of the 6,000, maybe 6,500 or so that we encountered, about 2,500 were expelled via Title 42. Starting May 23rd, when Title 42 goes away, we then have to deal with all of those 2,500 people, and we just don't have a plan in place for the additional resources. So when Title 42 goes away, not only is it going to make our job somehow even more impossible to do, it creates this potential for all these people to now request asylum, regardless of the legitimacy of their claims, which is going to bog down an already broken system. So we're at this point where agents are left wondering, what are we going to do? Nobody has told us what this plan is. And DHS, of course, released a statement recently claiming that they have this comprehensive whole of government approach to resolving it. But that whole of government approach apparently doesn't include telling us what the plan is. So we need a policy that will fix this, because we're not going to be able to just get people to stop wanting to cross the border the way that they are. We're seeing people here in Del Rio from across the globe, West and North Africa, Central and South America, the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, South Asia, everywhere. And they're all coming to the Texas border in droves, along with Yuma, Arizona. Our concern is that we're going to see more situations like we had with the Haitian migrant camp up and down the border. And DHS is talking about building additional soft-sided facilities. We're not quite sure where yet, but they're looking to add quite a few more. That may help with some of it, but all that's going to do is sort of invite more and more people to come as we get perhaps more efficient at processing them. So we don't have a plan. I don't know what plan they could come up with that is going to allow Border Patrol agents to get back into the field to do their job. And ultimately, that's our number one concern. Thanks, Brandon.
Leader McCarthy, if you don't mind me jumping in, I want to emphasize what John just said. 240 miles of border at times are completely left open, not even being patrolled by a Border Patrol agent, simply transport units going out and picking up people that are giving up 240 miles. Then if you look at Yuma, at any given time, 90% of the resources could be in doing administrative duties. That's transport, hospital watch, taking care of detention facilities, and of course, processing. That means that the border is left completely open in large stretches. That allows criminal organizations to, again, bring in their higher value products. And they're doing this knowing darn good and well that all they have to do is flood our resources, which pulls us out of the field. Look at the Ukrainians. The criminal organizations are so sophisticated that they recognize and understand that they cannot force the Ukrainians to cross our borders illegally. They're letting them present themselves at the ports of entry because they understand the political whims around the world. And if they force Ukrainians to cross the border illegally and pay the fees that they charge to cross the border, there would be a political uprising, which would then shine a spotlight on their organizations and what they're doing. These cartels know exactly what they're doing, and they exploit our policies to create these gaps of 240 miles where there is nobody there to patrol the border. That is a scary situation, and it puts our country at great risk and danger. With that, I'll turn it over to Hector Garza.
It looks like he might have dropped off, Brandon.
Chris, can you please give us a brief of what you're seeing in RGV?
Sure. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. The numbers in the Rio Grande Valley have rose significantly over the past month, some 5,000 plus apprehensions up from last month to from February to March. With the interesting part is 2/3 of those apprehensions come from our two westernmost stations. Those are the areas that we have the most problem with. One of the big issues we deal with is transport. 50% of our manpower starts off their shift, whether it be in the station or hospital watch or transport. So from the beginning of the 10-hour shift, we already lost half of our manpower. Some hour, 2 hours in, we probably lose another 10% getting called in. By the end of the shift, we're probably down to maybe 30% out in the field. We've seen a huge jump in smuggling attempts by vehicle. Average day, we see 3, 4 per shift. And the got-away numbers are very hard to trust when nobody, even in our area where we have the most agents, we don't have people out there to check and see what's getting away from us. It's busy from 24 hours a day down here. It's constant. One of the things that concerns me is with this Title 42 going away, it coincides with the heat, the Texas summers, which we're going to see a lot more heat-related casualties. We're beckoning more people to come in because they know once they get here, they're not going back. We just know that. Everybody knows that. They know that around the world. They know that the root cause is the catch and release system. The other thing that's very concerning to me being down here close to the coast is you want to put more south-sided facilities up to coincide with hurricane season. And that's just a recipe for disaster. We're seeing a lot more unaccompanied children coming in. That's very concerning. And like John said, with the Colombians, the Venezuelans, the Cubans and Nicaraguans, that is most of what we catch. In the Rio Grande Valley, I believe we're 72% other than Mexican. So it's not just regular folks crossing to work, it's people coming from all over the globe. Recently, we started to see an uptick in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkey. So we don't know how many is getting away. And once this thing opens up, we're already underwater. In McAllen, it's a little different because we have more resources than, say, Del Rio or Big Bend or even Laredo. And so we're able to somewhat stem the flow, but by no means are we anywhere near controlling it. And when Del Rio starts getting hit, they don't have the resources that we have. So they're in even worse shape than what we are out here. So once they end this Title 42, it's going to turn out very, very bad for everybody involved, for the local communities, for the ranching communities, you name it. And, that's all I have. Thank you.
Leader McCarthy, do you have any, or any of your members have any questions for us? Is there anything that we can help you out?
Katko, you want to start?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Kevin, and thank all of you for what you're trying to do at the border, and it breaks our heart to hear these numbers, but quite frankly, they're stunning. And I don't want to replow the ground that you've already talked about because I trust some of my colleagues will touch on this. But I want to talk about something you didn't really mention. And I want to make sure I got the math right. I took out my phone and got out my calculator here. As I understand, there's about 8,000 a day coming across the border. Is that correct? And
that is correct.
What is the minimum that individuals pay the cartels to come across, understanding that everybody has to pay the cartels or they can't come across?
The minimum is right at $4,000. That's the minimum. That's for Mexicans and for people in Central America. Again, it goes much higher as you get away from countries that are closer to the United States.
Understood. So that's about 32 million a day going to the cartels times 30. It's about $1 billion a month at a bare minimum, probably a lot higher. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And now, do you have concerns about what that's going to do to the cartels? Because this is in addition to the record number of drugs they're coming across that are enriching the cartels. This is like a whole new industry for them. Is that right?
It is.
Okay, so do you have any ideas, from the intel I've heard, they're starting to be able to develop the expertise to produce the fentanyl themselves. They're getting into cyber activities. And so my concern is that they're going to create whole nation states, basically, within Mexico that is going to further destabilize Mexico's government. And for the first time in our nation's history, we're going to have a border country that is not stable. And the long-term effects of that are dangerous. Is that basically what you're hearing as well?
It is. When you look at the amount of money that they're able to generate, they're going to be able to, if you will, and I don't say this tongue in cheek, they're going to be able to buy governments if they want to do that. That's how dangerous this situation is getting.
It's very, very important for my colleagues to hear, and I appreciate it. Thank you for all you're doing, and keep fighting a good fight. We're going to do everything we can to help you, my friend.
Then we go to Tony
We're sad to see you go, by the way.
I won't be going away from this issue.
Tony Gonzalez and then Andy Biggs.
Brandon, John, everybody, thank you for all the hard work you're doing. Really appreciate 365, 24/7. You guys are out there. My question is to the morale of the workforce. And it gets to, what are you seeing, I'll start with John, I guess. What are you seeing as far as suicides, alcohol-related incidents, and will you talk a little bit about mandatory overtime? I mean, a lot of the agents that I talk to, they have to work six days a week. Can you just speak to the morale of the workforce?
Sure. Said every time I think morale can't get lower than it is, somehow it happens. Mandatory overtime, at least in Del Rio sector, we've had it off and on since last summer. Because we just don't have the resources to deal with it. Last summer, it was nowhere near as bad as it is right this second. So back then, we were using it and trying to stay ahead, and now it's almost impossible to stay ahead of what's coming across. So agents, of course, that's more time away from their families. They're stressed out more. They take that home. I think CBP-wide, we're looking at 6 suicides so far this year. We just had one just a couple nights ago over in Yuma. So, it's hard to really quantify how people feel about this, other than when you go to the station at the start of a shift, everyone's just sort of depressed. Nobody's really, they don't enjoy the job anymore. A lot of agents, they're upset because they can't do the job because they believe in the mission, and they know that every day when they see people getting away, including on cameras, they have cameras where they can see the faces of the people who are getting away. So when they see that happening and they know that they are trained and that's their job is to go out there and pursue those people, and they can't do that because they're essentially having to babysit people that are in our custody already, it's incredibly demoralizing.
What about the northern sector, folks? One of the things that surprised me, I visited, I did a little swing on Christmas Day, and I was thinking, it was going to be pretty light, and it wasn't. It was just like any other day. But the part that surprised me was over half of those agents were from the Detroit sector. Can you maybe Brandon can you speak a little bit about what our northern sector, what kind of impact do those agents have?
What we're doing currently is we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We are moving resources from one area to try to deal with a busier area. But all that does is that shows the cartels where our weak spots are, and it allows them to go into those areas. Let's just go back a couple months ago when you had those Indian nationals, individuals from the country of India that were trying to cross near Minnesota. I'm sorry, the state of Minnesota. They lost their lives due to the frigid weather, and we wouldn't have even known about it except for the survivors got a hold of local law enforcement. We did not even know that they entered our country illegally. We did not know that they were in Canada trying to enter our country illegally. Now, those individuals, they died in the country of Canada, but the individuals that called the authorities, they were in the United States, and we didn't know about it until they contacted us. When you send resources from one area to another area, all you're doing is creating the gaps that allows the cartels to exploit our coverage. And that happens on the northern border, the coastal border, and on the southwest border. It happens on all of our borders.
Thanks. Can you hear me, Brandon?
I can, yes.
Okay, good. Thanks, John, Chris, Brandon. Thanks, you guys, for being here, and appreciate all that you do. I just want to cover 2 quick things, and I know one of them's going to seem facile, but it's not meant to be facile. We are finally going to get a chance the Border Security Caucus has Secretary Mayorkas coming in tomorrow. And there are so many, I have probably 4 or 5 pages of questions to ask him, but I'm wondering, besides one thing you guys talked about, and John, you really talked about it a lot, is that there is no plan for what happens when Title 42 goes away. Besides that, what would you have us put pressure on or ask Secretary Mayorkas about?
The main thing that you must get an answer to is how many people are being released after their process for Title VIII. That's the thing that is going to open the eyes of the American public more than anything. It's one thing for me to tell you that it's happening. It's another thing for the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security to actually be honest with the American public and tell them exactly how many people were released in the United States. You must get an answer to that.
Okay, we'll do our best, and we got Chief Magnus has agreed to come in as well in a few weeks, so we'll take care of him too. Last question for you is, you guys have not mentioned terrorists today, and yet when a year ago at this time, I think you'd had already 4 times as many folks on the terrorist watch list had already been apprehended, and that was numbers I was given unofficially. What do we look like as far as terrorists coming in, and especially when we know that you got Ukrainians coming in through the POEs, and you also now have Russians showing up in Yuma and other places?
Well, it's impossible for us. It's impossible for uniformed law enforcement to determine whether or not somebody is an actual terrorist. We take somebody into custody. Let's say that they're from Yemen or Syria or any of those countries that want to do us harm. When we take them into custody, once we find out that a name is on the terrorist watch list, we immediately contact both HSI and the FBI, and they take them out of our custody, and then they make that determination from there. The feedback is never given to the rank and file agents. It might be given to higher level management. I don't think it is, but we never receive the feedback of that. So it's really difficult for us to discuss whether or not we are actually apprehending terrorists. I would go as far as saying we're not apprehending terrorists, because the organizations are going to be very careful to ensure that an actual terrorist is not apprehended. And as easy it is to get across our borders, as porous as our borders are, they're going to be very effective at ensuring that people that are actual terrorists are not apprehended. So it's that old saying, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, does it make a sound? Same thing with this situation. Yes, we have apprehended about 34 people, my understanding, whose names match names on the terrorist watch list. We just don't know if they were the actual terrorists.
Great, thanks so much. Now you'll bet.
Let's go to Brian, Chip, then Tom and Debbie, and then we'll let the press ask questions.
Thank you. Brian Babin from Texas. Thank you so much for your service, my friend, and all the folks that are working under you. Just a couple of things. What are you hearing back? I mean, you guys have been very, very vocal, trying to keep DHS and Mayorkas from dispensing with Title 42. Are you just hearing crickets back? Because you said a while ago you're not getting any feedback at all. Was that what's happening?
Yeah, John touched on that, so I'm going to turn that question over to John, but it's safe to say that we get no feedback at all. John, would you like to take that?
Sure, that's right. When we reach higher than Border Patrol, the answer we get essentially is that we have a plan, but they just haven't shared it with us at this point. If you talk to Border Patrol management across the country, including at headquarters, they don't know, and of course they don't want Title 42 to go away either. So we are all unified on that front, and they're sort of in the better position because they have access to the stats and the information that Brandon just discussed that we don't have, like information about terrorists and that sort of thing. So they are in the same page as us in terms of expressing the desire to keep Title 42, and then assuming what eventually goes away, what is the alternative plan? Because no one, at least at the Border Patrol level, and nobody here with the union is being told what DHS intends to do.
What about? Go ahead. Yes.
Title 42 is not just about COVID. Title 42, the actual code in the United States code of the laws, basically, it says for any health emergency. So the CDC could come in and say, these third world countries are bringing in diseases that we just haven't seen in this country forever. And they could declare Title 42, even if this pandemic were to go away. So that's what we're seeing from this administration. It's a complete lack of care of anything that is crossing our border, not just COVID-19.
So would you say that this is a violation of the law that they dispense with Title 42 at this point in time?
I absolutely would say it is.
Violation of the law. Okay. And then also one quick thing, the USCIS bureaucrats are getting ready to, asylum officers are getting ready to take the place of immigration judges, where I think the result of this is going to wind up being every migrant coming over will be an asylum seeker, and we will look at rubber stamping for approvals of asylum. What is that going to do to the numbers?
That's one of the scariest things that I look at right now is if you remove the judiciary from a process, you're now giving complete authority to one department with no overview from a second department. And anytime that happens, then you're susceptible to corruption. You're susceptible for undue influence by the executive branch. You cannot remove the judiciary from having oversight over what a department does and expect things to go smoothly. Once that happens, more people are going to be granted asylum, and when more people are granted asylum, those numbers are going to skyrocket even more than we're currently seeing.
Okay, this is what I want to do for purpose of time. Chip, if you'll give your question, Tom, you give your question, Debbie, you give your question. Don't answer until you hear all the questions, because I want to give some time to the press to ask before we go to press conference. Go ahead.
Good to see you. Good to see all you guys. Thanks for what you're doing. I'm going to do two quick questions, and as Kevin said, he'll pass it down the line. Question number one is, you just said any health emergency or something along those lines. My reading of Title 42 is any communicable disease, and I think that's an important distinction, so we need to keep that in mind. And relatedly, our Title 42, this is for this room, discharge petition, is based on a bill Yvette introduced, which says as long as there's a public health emergency declared by the president, Title 42 needs to stay in place. So if we need to switch gears on anything on Title 42, we might need a different underlying Title 42 bill to then make ripe that isn't tied to that. So I just throw that out here for consideration. I wanted to throw that. So my question related to that, Brandon, is we're only talking about Title 42 because it's an emergency right now, but there are a whole bunch of other things that need to be done, including migrant protection protocols, return to Mexico under a federal court order, et cetera. So I wonder if you could talk to that. And then secondly, do you believe this is an invasion? Would you define it as an invasion as it relates to what the cartels are doing, what has happened with fentanyl, what is happening to our ranchers, what is happening to our Texans, what is happening to Americans dying, et cetera, et cetera?
My question is simply numbers, Brandon. Number one, how many illegal immigrants have been deliberately admitted into the United States since this administration took office, and how many gotaways have entered the United States? Can you give that at the top of your head?
Yeah, so last year in 2021, more than 1 million individuals were released into the United States as well as the gotaways. So we allowed more than 1
gotaways?
million illegal border crossers into the United States.
And how many gotaways? How many gotaways?
It was 400,000 in 2021 and 600,000 that were released. So 1 million people. This year, we're already on pace to go right around 2 million.
And you said 8,000 encounters per day right now, and what do you expect that to increase to once Title 42 is removed?
I believe by next month, by the end of next month, we'll hit 12,000, and I can see that we'll easily hit 18,000 at some point.
All of those being admitted, or virtually all?
Well, if Title 42 goes away and we have to process them under Title 8, yes, they will all virtually be released into the United States.
Okay, let's do Debbie Lesko's question, then answer Chip's and Debbie's, and then I want to have the press be able to ask some questions.
Thank you for everything that you are doing. Don't give up hope, because I think Republicans are going to get the majority, and at least we'll have some leverage, hopefully, on the Biden administration. My question, well, first I'm going to comment. I was at an event Friday night in Richmond, Virginia, a bunch of people in the suburbs, and I talked about Title 42 going away, and they didn't really, they don't realize what we do in Arizona about how dangerous this is. And so I was trying to think of an angle that would affect people that aren't in border states, and one of them was about sex trafficking. and about the girls and women being raped. And I was wondering if you could just tell our other members how Biden administration is basically part of this whole sex trafficking, sex slave business.
I'd like to turn it over to Chris real quick to address the communicable diseases that we're seeing in RGV. He has dealt with that greatly. Chris, could you touch on the communicable diseases?
Yes. Down here, I think everybody I know, everybody I work with at my station, and probably every station throughout here, has had COVID at one point. Our guys, when they go into these processing centers, a lot of times they come out with respiratory illnesses that can't be identified by the doctors. We have different strains of flu that come in, untreatable tuberculosis, and that's not even including some of the minor ones like scabies and lice. That stuff just runs rampant through our facilities. We do what we can to keep up with it, to try and get everything clean, but it's just so difficult out there in the field environment. And that's not even taking in the fact that the stuff with the ticks, the Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Lyme disease, stuff like that. So it is a very big issue for our guys. And it's very concerning because COVID, while not to downplay it, it is something that's very serious, but that's just a drop in the bucket for what we see down here.
Thank you. I'm going to address Congressman Roy's question. Is this an invasion? These are transnational criminal organizations. They understand how to destabilize governments. They understand what needs to be done in order for them to make money. They understand that the more people that they're able to get into the United States, the more havoc that they can wreak, the weaker the United States becomes. So for these transnational criminal organizations, are they in fact trying to destabilize our government? I would have to say absolutely.
On Debbie's question, we'll go to the media. Answer Debbie's question about human trafficking, sex trafficking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. John, would you like to touch on that, please?
Sure. The human trafficking piece of this is something we're seeing across the country. And it's been in the news more so in the past couple of years than ever before. But the fact that we're not even in the field in a lot of areas shows that they're able to exploit that, to be able to get people across that we have no idea are there, and then take them wherever they're going to be in the country. And we're seeing it pop up all over the place. ICE and the FBI and other agencies are basically hammering sex trafficking rings around the country. So until we're able to get a better hold of security along the border, that's only going to get worse. There's just no way around it.
Congresswoman, and I'm going to touch on that real quick as well. If we see a young girl or even a young woman that is by themselves, the chances that they are being moved into the country for sex trafficking is very high, especially if they don't have a specific sponsor that is already here. We just had Senator Hagerty on the border this last weekend. His wife was there as well. We spoke with, his wife was there as I was speaking with some young girls, 13, 14, 16, one that was even 21 years old. Their demeanor, the way they act, how shy they are, clearly shows that there is a very good possibility that these individuals are being brought here into the United States and they are going into the sex trafficking industry. They don't know that. They don't understand that when they put themselves in the hands of these criminal organizations. And that's what's very frustrating to my agents and I. We have to deal with the fallout. We have to listen to the stories, and it's driven by liberal policies. If you condone catch and release, if you continue to allow this to happen, you're going to continue to invite vulnerable women and children to put themselves in the hands of these criminal cartels. And when they get here, they get to exploit them how they want until their fees are paid off.
Public portion of this, and thank you all for participating.